Hello, it's Monday. That means it's another episode of Run Talk from our studios in Southern California. This is Run Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Karp. On today's show, we're going to do something very, very interesting. We're going to link concepts. Today's show is going to take us all the way back to 1950 and Hans Selye, who was an endocrinologist from Hungary. And in 1950, he developed this theory of how humans and how organisms adapt, and it became known as the general adaptation syndrome. And the reason we're going to talk about this today is because just yesterday I got my first shot of the COVID vaccine. Woo woo! And so I love being able to link concepts, because have you ever wondered why there are two doses of the vaccine? And for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, there's only one dose. And if you look up the data and the research results, the two-dose vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna, they have more efficacy. They have greater results to protect you from getting the disease than the one-shot Johnson & Johnson. There's a very particular reason for that. And why that occurs has huge implications for how you should train as a runner. So today we're going to go all the way back to 1950. Hans Selye was an endocrinologist from Hungary who then moved to Canada and did a lot of his research up in Canada. And he did a lot of his research on small rodents, rats and mice and other small rodents that are commonly used in scientific research. And what he found is that rats who are given a small dose of some stressor, whether that is a toxic drug or heat or cold exposure or some other stressor, that they have a better adaptive response if they are given a small amount of that stressor first, followed later by a greater amount of that stressor. And that became known as the general adaptation syndrome, to look at how organisms respond to a stress. And there are different stages of that. So first is the alarm stage, when you introduce a stressor. So when you introduce a workout, there's this alarm stage. Your body has to recognize what this new type of stress is, because basically in training, you apply these stressors that knock your body out of homeostasis. And so there is a process your body goes through to respond and adapt to that stress, so that when that same amount of stress is given in the future, it doesn't cause the same degree of physiological disruption. And that's the whole idea behind the vaccines. If you were given the entire dose of the vaccine all at once, that's going to be too overwhelming for your body to handle. The way your body will adapt better, more adequately, is if you give a small amount of the dose first, just enough for your body to recognize what's going on and make the adaptations. And then you're given a larger dose later as the booster shot. And so this whole idea of why there are two doses for the vaccine, it's the same reason for how you should train. It has direct implications for how you should train. And this goes all the way back to 1950 in Hans Selye. So look up after you get done listening today. Hi, everybody. When you get done listening, go and look up Hans Selye and the general adaptation syndrome. If you don't want to look it up, that's fine. It's going to be all in my next book. I have a book coming out this year on periodization of training. I go through a lot of detail about the general adaptation syndrome and what that means for training. So let's talk about that. What does that mean for training? So when you move throughout the year from one phase of training to the next phase of training, the first time that you do a specific kind of a workout, just do a little bit of that workout. So say you're transitioning from your aerobic base phase to the more quality aerobic work, the threshold phase, or from threshold to VO2 max, or from VO2 max to anaerobic capacity. Regardless of which phase you're going from, you're ending that phase and starting a new phase. When it's time for a new type of a workout, only give a little bit of that workout, just enough of a dose for your body to react and respond to that. And then in subsequent workouts, maybe the next week or 2 weeks later, then you give a larger dose. And then you keep doing that over time so that you increase the volume of work done at that intensity throughout that entire phase. And that's how I have always planned the training, that if you transition from one phase to another, and maybe you give one workout, a smaller dose, that one workout that first week, and you allow your body to adapt to that one workout. And then maybe a week later, or even 2 or 3 weeks later, then you put in a second workout. So don't do two workouts that focus on that same stress right away, right out of the gate. Give one workout and make it a small dose of that workout. Allow your body to respond and adapt, make the necessary physiological adaptations, recognize that new stress, and then you start to enter, you add another second workout in. Does that make sense? Yes or yes? Oh, good. I'm glad that makes sense. So here's an example. Say we transition from the aerobic work, the threshold training, and now it's time for the harder, more VO2 max kind of training, where you're really focused on the heart pumping blood and oxygen to the working muscles, and you're working at your maximum heart rate. That's a very difficult kind of a workout. So maybe the first time you do that, just do one workout that first week, and just do a few reps, maybe 3 or 4, whatever it is, times 800 meters. Let's just go with 800 meters. That's pretty standard. So maybe you just do 3 or 4 reps, and that's it. Just enough. Don't exhaust yourself on the first day. Just enough for your body to recognize that. And then a week later, you can add a few more reps. Add maybe 2 or 3 more reps, so that maybe you do 5 or 6 reps that second week. And then maybe a week later, then you can add in a second workout. Make it a slightly different type of a VO2 max workout, but you can add in a second workout. And so now you'll have 2 stimuli that 1 week, but you don't start out that way. And that's the way you plan the training throughout the year. As you're within each phase, you give a little bit of a dose, and then you give more of that dose, and then as you transition from one phase of training to the next, you don't start out with such a heavy dose, right? And I thought this was so timely after having gotten the first vaccine shot yesterday, because one thing that I notice a lot of is that runners and even coaches don't tend to link all these concepts. And what we're learning now, with the vaccine, it's so present in our daily lives. All we hear about now is the vaccine and getting out of this pandemic. And I don't know how many people actually ever consider why there are 2 doses and what that means for you as a runner. That's the secret to how to be a better runner. Don't just give the whole full dose right out of the gate. Give yourself just a small amount of that workout initially and allow your body to adapt. And what do I mean by adapt? Well, you know what? This is another linking of the concept that nobody thinks about. 2 of the vaccines, the ones that have 2 doses, they work by messenger RNA. It's the exact same way that you adapt to training. When you do a workout or a series of workouts, you replicate one strand of your DNA. That's called DNA replication. You copy one of the 2 strands. Remember the 2 strands we learned about in high school biology class? There are 2 helical strands woven together to make the DNA. We all have seen the picture of the DNA strands woven together. When you do a workout, that signals your DNA to a whole sequence of events that start. The first event is a replication or copying of one of those 2 strands. And then from that replicated DNA strand, that is transcribed into messenger RNA. And that's called DNA transcription. And so with the vaccines, to link these 2 concepts, that's what 2 of the vaccines do. They bypass that first step, the DNA replication. You're getting injected the messenger RNA. The messenger RNA is a code to make a specific kind of a protein. So whether it's with the vaccine or with the workouts that you do through training, you make that messenger RNA, and then that messenger RNA is the code to make a specific kind of a protein. And then that event going from messenger RNA to protein is called translation, RNA translation. You translate that code into a specific protein. When you do a lot of endurance training, those proteins are mitochondria, the enzymes that are inside the mitochondria. They could be the proteins that build a new wall of a capillary to help with oxygen transportation, the oxygen delivery to the muscles. With the vaccine, they're giving you the messenger RNA, they're injecting inside of you the messenger RNA that will code, that is the code to make the antibody protein for the spike protein on the virus. How brilliant is that? And so by injecting the code, your body will read that code, translate that code into making the antibody proteins, so that if you were to be exposed to the virus, you already have the antibodies because they've been produced, because you've been given the messenger RNA. And so here's exactly how this is so amazing. I wish that every runner would be watching this right now, because here's how we link the scientific concepts and how it's all the same. When you do workouts, or you do a series of workouts, you get this concerted accumulation of messenger RNAs that are then translated into a host of functional and structural proteins. And that's how adaptation takes place. That's how you adapt to training. And that's a relatively slow process, because the process of training is all protein synthesis. It's all about making proteins. So whether you're getting the vaccine to make the antibody protein from the messenger RNA, or you're doing specific workouts to make the mitochondria and the capillaries and the enzymes and all the proteins we need to make in order to be able to run faster. It's all the same process. It's just a matter of a different code. It's a different messenger RNA. You get a different messenger RNA. If you do heavy strength training, you'll make the proteins that are involved in muscle contraction, myosin and actin. So the messenger RNA is different based on the training stimulus, based on the specific kinds of workouts that you do over many, many weeks and months and years. Does that make sense? Yes or yes? Good. Glad it makes sense. So I love this because it enables runners to then, hopefully the light bulb will go off, in your head that, yeah, this is why there are 2 doses of the vaccine. This is why I have to train this way. This is how I'm going to adapt to the training. When you understand how you adapt, then that puts you in control of how you design the training, how much time you give between workouts. There's a reason why with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, you have to wait a few weeks. The Pfizer, I think, is 3 weeks. Moderna is 4 weeks until you get the second shot. There's a reason for that, because it takes time for the messenger RNA code to be read and to produce these new proteins. If you did the second shot only 3 days later, it would be ineffective, because you have not yet made the proteins from the messenger RNA from the first shot. Does that make sense? So there's a reason for these timelines, and it's the same thing for when you train. There's a reason why each phase of training needs to be at least 4 weeks long. There are reasons for this, and when you understand those reasons, that opens up a whole new door of opportunity for you, and then that helps you understand how you need to train. So whether you're a coach or a runner, this is very important for people to understand, because this dictates the training process. Okay, so just to recap, if you're just chiming in right now, welcome. Thank you for coming. I have to look to see who's here. Hi, Alex in New York. Oh, Alex is here. Hi. So when you do a new kind of a workout, when you're transitioning from one phase to the next, first give a small amount of that workout. Don't give the whole bolus workout all at once. Don't do 10 reps at 800 meters at VO2 max pace the first time. Don't kill yourself the first time. Give yourself just one small dose, just like that first vaccine shot. One small dose, allow your body to react and respond to that, make the messenger RNA, make the proteins from that messenger RNA, and then you give a stronger dose, your booster shot, so to speak. You give a stronger dose later. And that's how you march through the training process anytime that you start a new kind of a workout, a new stimulus. It's all about stress and response, And if you don't believe me, go read 1950, Hans Selye's General Adaptation Syndrome, and it'll all be in my next book on periodization and training strategies for runners that will come out sometime later this year. So if there's any question, feel free to ask questions. I never get a chance to look at the questions because I have to squint to look at the questions while I'm talking. So forgive me if I don't answer your questions. If there are any questions, then I can answer them. After we're done, I can go back and look and answer the question. But all of these run talks, I think this is my 42nd or 43rd episode. All the run talks are on my website at run-fit.com, and they're all uploaded onto my YouTube channel, Dr. Jason Karp. So, and they're all going to be on Instagram here. They're not. They're all saved on Facebook as well. So thank you very much for coming. And I always finish each of these run talks with a thought for the day. And so today my thought ties into what we just talked about, adaptation. Life is full of stress, not just the running stress, but all different kinds of stress. And as my mother used to say, you have to learn how to roll with the punches. I get emotional when I think about this because my mother passed away 10.5 years ago. But I remember certainly, we all remember things that our parents taught us. And one of the things my mother taught me is this cliche that everyone's heard of, that you have to learn how to roll with the punches because life is full of punches, it's full of stress, and you have to learn how to adapt. And so, very much like the adaptation to training or the adaptation to the COVID vaccine shots that we're all getting, is adapting to life itself and understanding that there are going to be punches in the face, and how you adapt and respond to that is what defines the course that you take throughout your life. And so, every time you have a stress, remember that you have this chance now to adapt to that stress, pivot if you have to, and do something a little differently than you did before, because there are always going to be things that don't work out, that you want things and you're not going to be able to get things. There are always going to be things that don't work out. There are always going to be things that don't go the way you want them to go. But life is all about learning how to adapt and respond and take a different course of action to be able to still achieve what you want to achieve. Okay, so I'll leave you with that. That look at adaptation in two ways: the acute adaptation, the physiological adaptation that we make to training, and then the more global adaptation that helps us chart our course through life. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Dr. Jason Karp. This has been another episode of Run Talk. Thank you. See you next week.